Jake loved the open road. As a long-haul trucker, he often found himself driving through remote areas, miles away from civilization. One late autumn night, Jake was driving through the Navajo Nation in Arizona. The landscape was desolate, with only the moonlight illuminating the rocky terrain. The radio was off, and the only sound was the hum of the truck's engine. Around midnight, Jake noticed something strange in his rearview mirror, a pair of glowing eyes following his truck. He glanced back, but they were gone. Shaking his head, he chalked it up to exhaustion and continued driving. After a few more miles, he saw a figure standing on the side of the road. At first, he thought it was a hitchhiker, but as he got closer, he realized something was off. The figure's proportions were wrong, its limbs too long and twisted. Jake's heart pounded as he sped past, but he couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. A few minutes later, he saw the same figure again, this time closer to the road. Jake gripped the steering wheel tightly, refusing to stop. Suddenly, he heard a loud thud on the roof of his truck, followed by the sound of scratching metal. His blood ran cold. He glanced in the side mirror and saw the creature clinging to the side of his truck. Its face was contorted into a grotesque smile, and its eyes glowed with an unnatural light. Jake swerved, trying to shake it off, but it held on tight. Desperate, he remembered a story he had heard from a fellow trucker about skinwalkers, witches that could transform into animals and people. Jake reached for the silver crucifix his mother had given him, hanging on the rearview mirror. He held it up, and the creature let out a blood-curdling scream. It leaped off the truck, disappearing into the night. Jake didn't stop driving until he reached the nearest town. He parked at a diner, his hands shaking as he lit a cigarette. He knew he had encountered a skinwalker, and he vowed never to drive through that area alone again. As he sat in the diner, he overheard two old locals discussing strange occurrences in the area. He decided to join their conversation and shared his experience. Their faces turned pale, and they warned him that skinwalkers were known to seek revenge. The next night, Jake was on the road again, despite his fear. As he drove through the same desolate stretch, he noticed his headlights flickering. Suddenly, his truck stalled. He tried to restart the engine, but it wouldn't turn over. The radio, which had been silent, suddenly blasted static, followed by a faint, eerie whispering of his name. Jake's heart pounded as he grabbed the crucifix and exited the truck to check under the hood. As he worked, he felt eyes on him. He turned to see the same twisted figure standing in the shadows, now accompanied by several others. They watched him with glowing eyes, slowly advancing. Panicking, Jake rushed back into the truck, locking the doors. He fumbled for his phone but had no signal. The creatures circled his truck, tapping on the windows and whispering his name. He prayed for help, clutching the crucifix tightly. Just when he thought all hope was lost, a pair of headlights appeared in the distance. A beat-up pickup truck pulled up, and an elderly Navajo man got out, chanting in a language Jake didn't understand. The skinwalkers shrieked and retreated into the darkness. The man approached Jake's truck and motioned for him to follow. Jake, too terrified to refuse, started his truck, which miraculously roared to life. He followed the man to a small, isolated house. The man introduced himself as Thomas and invited Jake inside. Thomas explained that he was a medicine man and had been battling skinwalkers his entire life. He offered Jake protection for the night and taught him some basic protection rituals. Thomas warned Jake that the skinwalkers were relentless and might try to find him again. Grateful but shaken, Jake thanked Thomas and left at dawn. He continued his route, always keeping the protection rituals in mind. Though he never saw the skinwalkers again, he could never shake the feeling of being watched, especially when driving through remote areas at night. Jake's encounter with the skinwalkers changed him forever. He became more cautious and respectful of the old legends and the dangers lurking in the shadows. And he never traveled without the silver crucifix, a constant reminder of the night he survived an encounter with a shapeshifter. Emma and her friends, Sarah and Tom, were on a cross-country road trip. They had planned to drive through some of the most scenic routes, including the remote areas of the Southwest. On the second night of their journey, they found themselves driving through a desolate stretch of highway that cut through Navajo Nation land. The sun had set, and the darkness seemed to swallow the road ahead. The trio chatted and laughed to keep their spirits up, but as they drove deeper into the night, a sense of unease began to settle over them. The radio played softly, but the static would occasionally break through, adding to the eerie atmosphere. "Did you guys hear that?" Sarah asked, her voice tinged with nervousness. Emma and Tom fell silent, listening intently. At first, they heard nothing but the hum of the car's engine. Then, a distant, chilling howl echoed through the night. "Probably just a coyote," Tom said, trying to sound confident. But Emma wasn't so sure. She had heard stories about the Skinwalkers, witches that could take on the form of animals and wreak havoc on anyone they encountered. A few miles later, they saw a figure standing by the side of the road. It was a man, or at least it looked like one. His clothes were tattered, and his face was obscured by the shadows. Emma felt a chill run down her spine as they drove past. "Maybe we should stop and help him," Sarah suggested, but Emma shook her head. "Something doesn't feel right," she replied, her eyes fixed on the rearview mirror. The figure had disappeared. The group continued driving, but the sense of unease only grew stronger. Emma kept glancing in the mirrors, half expecting to see the figure again. Then, without warning, the car's engine sputtered and died. "Damn it," Tom muttered, trying to restart the car. But it was no use. The engine wouldn't turn over. The radio crackled to life, playing a distorted version of a song they didn't recognize. The air inside the car felt heavy, oppressive. Emma's heart raced as she looked out into the darkness. She saw movement in the shadows, but it was too dark to make out any details. "Do you see that?" she whispered. Tom and Sarah peered into the night, their faces pale. The shadows seemed to shift and move, as if something was lurking just out of sight. Suddenly, a loud thud came from the roof of the car, followed by the sound of scratching metal. "Get out of the car!" Emma shouted. They scrambled out, grabbing their flashlights. As they shone the beams onto the roof, they saw deep claw marks gouged into the metal. The air was filled with an eerie silence, broken only by the sound of their ragged breathing. Tom pointed his flashlight into the darkness, and they saw the figure again, standing just at the edge of the light. It moved toward them with unnatural speed, its limbs contorting as it transformed into a grotesque animal-like creature. Its eyes glowed with a malevolent light, and it let out a guttural growl. The trio backed away, their flashlights trembling in their hands. Emma remembered a protection chant she had heard in a folklore class and began to recite it, her voice shaking. The creature paused, its glowing eyes fixed on her. As she continued chanting, the creature let out a horrifying scream and retreated into the shadows. The silence that followed was deafening. Emma, Tom, and Sarah stood frozen, their eyes scanning the darkness for any sign of the creature. After what felt like an eternity, the car's engine roared to life on its own. They didn't question their luck. Tom jumped into the driver's seat, and they sped away from the accursed place. They drove in silence for miles, each of them lost in their thoughts. The fear slowly began to ebb away, replaced by a lingering sense of dread. They knew they had encountered something beyond their understanding, something that defied the natural order. When they finally reached a populated area, they pulled into a well-lit gas station. The bright lights and the presence of other people felt like a blessing. They got out of the car, still shaken, and inspected the roof. The claw marks were deep and unmistakable, a chilling reminder of their encounter. Emma, Tom, and Sarah decided to cut their road trip short. They couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, even in the safety of the daylight. They knew the legend of the Skinwalkers was not just a story. It was a terrifying reality they had narrowly escaped. As they drove back home, they couldn't help but glance at the shadows, wondering if they would ever truly be free from the lurking menace. Sam was driving home after a late-night shift at the diner. It was a quiet, lonely stretch of road, surrounded by dense forest on both sides. The moonlight barely penetrated the canopy, casting eerie shadows across the pavement. The hum of the engine and the occasional rustling of leaves were the only sounds breaking the silence. As he drove deeper into the night, Sam noticed a flickering light in his rearview mirror. It seemed to be getting closer. He squinted, trying to make out what it was. Suddenly, the light disappeared, and his car's engine sputtered and died. The headlights dimmed, leaving him in near total darkness. Sam tried to restart the engine, but it wouldn't turn over. Frustrated, he grabbed his flashlight from the glove compartment and stepped out of the car. The cold night air sent a shiver down his spine. He popped the hood and checked the engine, but everything seemed fine. He was about to get back into the car when he heard it, a low guttural growl coming from the trees. He turned, shining his flashlight into the forest. At first, he saw nothing but shadows. Then, a pair of glowing eyes emerged from the darkness, followed by a tall, thin figure. Its limbs were unnaturally long, and its face was hidden in shadow. Sam's heart pounded in his chest as he backed away slowly. The figure stepped closer, revealing a distorted, grotesque face. Its eyes glowed with a malevolent light, and its mouth twisted into a sinister grin. Sam stumbled back, nearly dropping his flashlight. He remembered the stories his grandfather used to tell him about skinwalkers, witches that could take on the form of animals and people. The creature moved with unnatural speed, closing the distance between them in an instant. Sam turned and ran, the flashlight beam bouncing wildly as he sprinted back to the car. He dove inside, locking the doors behind him. The creature scratched at the windows, its claws leaving deep gouges in the glass. Sam fumbled for his phone, but there was no signal. The creature let out a chilling howl, and the car shook as it pounded on the roof. Desperate, Sam reached for the crucifix his mother had given him, hanging from the rearview mirror. He held it up, praying for help. The creature screeched and backed away, its glowing eyes fixed on the crucifix. It retreated into the shadows, but Sam knew it wasn't gone. He kept the crucifix clutched in his hand as he tried the ignition again. Miraculously, the engine roared to life. Sam sped down the road, glancing in the rearview mirror. The creature stood at the edge of the forest, watching him with those malevolent eyes. He didn't stop driving until he reached the safety of his apartment. That night, Sam couldn't sleep. Every shadow seemed to hide a lurking menace. Every creak of the building a sign of the creature's return. He knew the stories were true. The skinwalkers were real, and he had narrowly escaped their grasp. From that night on, Sam never drove alone at night without the crucifix. He warned others of the dangers that lurked in the darkness, but few believed him. The encounter had changed him, leaving him with a deep-seated fear that he would never truly shake. Even in the safety of his home, he could never forget the glowing eyes and the twisted smile of the creature that stalked him on that lonely road. And he knew that somewhere, in the darkness, it was still watching, waiting for the chance to strike again.